It's my pleasure to chair this important event, announcing a new 3-year partnership today between two real powerhouses under any definition internationally. The Anti-Defamation League, who for many decades have literally been at the forefront of the fight against discrimination in the United States and indeed across the world, and remains so to this day, even more active than ever. And Chelsea Football Club and the Chelsea Football Club Foundation. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to congratulate Bruce and Chelsea Football Club, not just a powerhouse, but officially the top club in Europe, which therefore in football terms undoubtedly means in the world, the champions of Europe. And so to have these two powerhouses, the ADL and Chelsea Football Club through the Chelsea FC Foundation, forming this new 3-year partnership is hugely significant. And the timing is appropriate, considering what we've seen worldwide, what we've experienced in the United Kingdom, across England, across the whole of the United Kingdom, in terms of the wave of increased anti-Semitism in very recent times, undermining, damaging, threatening the Jewish community across all generations, and in particular, I think, young Jewish people wanting to get on with their lives as equal citizens. And what this three-year partnership intends to do is harness the power of sport to tackle discrimination and anti-Semitism, both in person and online, building on the past success of the No Place to Hate campaign and overseeing the programme's expansion across Europe. And this will cover 5 key themes: extremism, technology, partnerships, education, and advocacy. And I'm delighted to say that the partnership is funded by the Chelsea club owner, Mr. Roman Abramovich. Thank you, Roman. And let me start with you, Jonathan, if I may. An integral part of the ADL is the Centre on Extremism. Can you tell us about the work the centre does? And now how Chelsea can help boost its efforts and its reach? Jonathan.
Sure, I would be happy to do that. First and foremost, let me just use the platform you've given me today to first just say how grateful we are at ADL to be in partnership with Chelsea Football Club. The support of Roman, the active engagement with Bruce, the chairman, and with Rola. It has really been a tremendously positive experience for all of us at ADL, because Chelsea is a global brand with an immense and passionate fan base. Our friends here are in a position to be enormously influential agents of positive change in the fight against anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and hate. So we're just so pleased and truly humbled at ADL to be able to collaborate and partner with them in our shared commitment to combat this form of intolerance. And I also just would like to acknowledge how much I appreciate sharing this virtual stage with Lord John Mann, who has been a great thought partner to ADL. He has been unstinting in sharing his insights with me and with Sharon, both on anti-Semitism challenges in the UK, but also globally. And one of the things I really appreciate is, you, Lord Mann, bring decades of experience at this. You've been fighting this fight longer than almost anyone in the British Parliament, long before it was sort of a in vogue thing to do. And so I'm so glad that the audience today has the opportunity to hear from you, because I think you speak from a place of conviction and courage that I wish other politicians, not only in the UK, around the world, really possessed. So I'm grateful to you for your leadership. So ADL, as you said, we are one of the leading anti-hate organizations in the world. We started this work literally more than a century ago. And today, ADL Center on Extremism is one of our core assets, doing incredibly important and breakthrough work that doesn't just have domestic, but it really has global repercussions. Our team of investigators, analysts, researchers, and technical experts, they are strategically monitoring, exposing, and disrupting extremistic threats, both sort of on the ground and in cyberspace. Literally working with law enforcement agencies at the local, state, national, and international level. We're very engaged in sharing information with our colleagues at the Community Security Trust, who also bring tremendous expertise to this work. And through that kind of engagement with them and with others, we provide resources, expertise, and educational briefings that really allow law enforcement officials, but also elected representatives, people in positions of authority, community leaders, as well as the internet and technology companies, Silicon Valley. We help them to identify and counter emerging threats before they take shape. Let me just give you some numbers. Just from last year, from 2020, to get a sense of the scope of this work, the Center on Extremism was cited by journalists and academic scholars more than 7,300 times last year. Think about that. Well over 7,000 times our work was cited or used to substantiate research. Our staff, this team, provided law enforcement with critical intelligence about extremist threats more than 1,100 times in 2020. We generated 112 reports and articles, pieces of analysis on extremism and extremist movements. So the level of output, the level of engagement, the level of production is literally unparalleled by any equivalent group in the world. And we know that the center's work has led to several arrests over the past 2 years of individuals who are planning attacks, sometimes on Jewish targets, sometimes on other targets. The FBI used the information that ADL provided to prevent what could have been lethal assaults on individuals and institutions. Now, what I'm so excited about is Chelsea's support will allow us to transform the center's technological capabilities and scale its impact for this digital moment we're living in, ensuring that the team spends more time identifying the threats, analyzing the trends, rather than harvesting the data and inputting the information. By expanding our ability to do this crucial work, it's no exaggeration to say that thanks to Chelsea's support, ADL very likely will save more lives in the years ahead. And for that, we're eternally grateful.
Well, Bruce, that's sounds a big partnership, and you've played a huge role. You've played a huge role personally, not just Chelsea Football Club, but you personally in the Premier League, Bruce. So you've been there earlier than others. So you've ticked the boxes and done a lot more than that. So why this partnership with the ADL, and how is it going to disrupt anti-Semitism and all the hateful discourse online that we see these days?
Thank you, John. Well, why partner with ADL? It's a pretty easy answer, to be honest. I mean, as Jonathan just said, ADL has been fighting discrimination, anti-Semitism for more than 100 years. I think it's 107 or 108 years, to be specific, since 1913. And they have an excellent track record. They know what they're doing. And we've worked with them successfully before, and Mr. Abramovich is very comfortable funding some of their projects. And we as a club, Rola and her team and others throughout the club, are very comfortable working together with ADL. In terms of the partnership and looking forward, I think you described the five components very well. But I view the partnership as something that we really have to do. There's an immediacy here that we have to deal with. When we started our anti-Semitism, fighting anti-Semitism campaign in late fall of 2018, we did it because Roman Abramovich saw that there was a rise in events around the world, in Brussels and Pittsburgh, elsewhere, and he really wanted to do something, and he really wanted us to do something. And I think thanks to Rola and her team, we have done a lot. But right now, I think the immediacy that caused the ADL to be formed in 1913 requires us to do something more right now. Because from our perspective, the online hate towards our players, men and women, the online hate towards some of our executives and even our owner has increased, I don't know, several fold in the last, say, 2 years or even 1 year. And we just have to do something about it. So within our organization under Rola's leadership, we're attacking this problem with new social media tools, with new social media policies, and with professional support from outside agencies to remove inappropriate social media immediately. I think our partnership with ADL will support us on monitoring and, most importantly, developing better tech to fight hate, to fight anti-Semitism. And as we develop that new technology between our funding and ADL, that technology will be available to not just other football clubs, but just to other entities. So that's really why Roman Abramovich and the club are doing this.
Thank you, Bruce. And Rola, if I can come to you, I mean, it's brilliant leadership from Chelsea Football Club over recent years, and consistently so. And you've run your huge campaign, Say No to Anti-Semitism. I mean, what learning from that campaign are you going to bring into this new partnership, with the focus being more online than it has been previously?
Well, I think firstly, just the fact that we as a football club are now able to enter such a partnership, and that a group like the ADL wants to work with us, really, I mean, for us is also really humbling. The ADL is the gold standard globally in terms of fighting hate, fighting discrimination, fighting anti-Semitism, and it's just such a long history there. So I think for our club, we very much share their values. And this is really, I think, a big milestone in our campaign to be able to bring our resources to this level, that we are able to partner in a professional way with a group like ADL. So thank you also, Sharon and Jonathan, for that. And I think with online, one thing that I think I've personally learned from ADL is really, I think they're very technology savvy. And I think they're very good at seeing the new challenges and the new threats and how the landscape is changing. And I think that partially inspired us. When we started the campaign, it was very much advocacy focused, educational focused, and that's still important. But the more we see the just enormous abuse that is going on online, as Bruce mentioned, it's even, targeting the club, but more so, I mean, it's, I think, against Jewish institutions and individuals and students, it's just become so much worse over the past years. So the ADL has definitely inspired us as a club to just take a completely different stance on this issue. Firstly, by being much more strict in terms of having a proper social media policy in place and communicating clearly what is expected by everyone connected to the club, staff, fans, and actually following up on that. But I think we're taking it a step further by also ensuring that we have technology where we can actually try to identify who the abusers are. Because it's not just about banning or deleting. I think we want to take it a step further and trying to solve the issue, not just push it elsewhere. And the work ADL does on a much more high level than we do has really, I think, inspired with that. But the overall learnings from these years, we're a football club, we're not experts on anti-Semitism, but I think we really learned over these years the power sport can have, the really global reach we can have, the global audience we have, and the possibility to reach young people. So I think with the right partnerships, combining our platforms and the resources we can bring to the table with experts such as the ADL, I think those type of unexpected partnerships hopefully can catch the attention and move the needle.
Oh, thank you, Rola. Sharon, advocacy work is, I think we would agree, incredibly important. And you've got a large program of advocacy work planned for the next few years. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into what that's going to look like and how that can help?
Happy to, John, and I want to also echo first and foremost Jonathan's words of appreciation. Both, Lord Mann, your work has been tremendous, tremendously impactful, and really your leadership voice, I have to say. You know, your words travel across the Atlantic, and we hear the impact of your leadership here in the US, and just know how tremendously important that is. And I will reiterate the partnership with Chelsea. For us as hopefully a global brand to partner with one of the most not only impressive, given this year's record, football clubs in the world, but also a club that has had the bravery and the courage to take on the challenges that it has, fighting hate, fighting anti-Semitism. You don't see that every day. And so we're tremendously honored to be partnering with a club that really takes on its global responsibility in the way it has. That's really commendable, and again, not often seen. So really, we're very excited to be partnering with Chelsea. Our policy work is really based on our advocacy, and it is really geared towards local needs. In the US, we have very specific advocacy priorities, but we realize that around the globe, the context matters and context differs. So the way we've done our MO, John, is by partnering with Jewish communities around the world, and in Europe for that matter, who are on the front line. We don't ever presume to speak on their behalf. We don't presume to speak for them. So the partnership is a very close partnership between ADL and every single Jewish community around the world. We collaborate, we strategize together, and we see where ADL can bring unique added value to their advocacy needs. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We got a request, for example, from the Finnish Jewish community who said that they were unsatisfied with the way Finnish law enforcement understood hate crime laws and were actually implementing when incidents came that were clearly anti-Semitic, and their law enforcement wasn't well versed enough in understanding when something happened, when violence is perpetrated, is it really just a common crime or is it a hate crime? So our experts at ADL provided extensive workshops to law enforcement in Finland, where we really deciphered not only historical anti-Semitic tropes, but also really brought key understanding analysis from white supremacist groups in Northern Europe and how they function, what kind of mechanisms they use. So it is in that very specific space that ADL shows up for Jewish communities, where we bring our unique value added. Another example would be, in Belgium this year, there's been legislation that is looking at banning male circumcision, a ritual that is key to Jewish life around the world and throughout history. Now, this is an example of legislation that kind of brings together those on the far right who are really targeting most probably Jewish, but more importantly, Muslim communities. And they're bringing their bias and their lack of tolerance for religious minorities, such as Muslims and Jews in their community, but also those on the far left who also want to maybe advocate for children's rights, but in a way that really infringes on the religious rights of minorities in European democracies. So ADL shows up for this in a way that is very specific. In our advocacy, we bring medical experts, we bring global perspectives on some of this advocacy, and we support the Jewish community of Belgium by saying that this would infringe upon the democracy and the rights of minorities, religious rights in any European country. So these are the specific ways we show up. We want to always have an added, special value added. And we hope that we're supporting the Jewish communities in their own protection of rights, protection of security, physical, online, in every way.
Sharon, thanks for that. And Jonathan, if I can, because you've been described as tech savvy at ADL, which is accurate. But why is there this shift, a noticeable shift in extremists and anti-Semites trying to infiltrate online spaces? I mean, where's this coming from? And do we have the tools? Do you have the tools that can really make a difference in relation to this?
It's a good question, Lord Mann. So I think there are a few things. So first of all, we've certainly seen over the years that extremists, you know, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And for years, extremists have been early adopters of new technology, new media, in an effort to insinuate, you know, their intolerance into the public conversation. They typically couldn't get attention on mainstream, you know, broadcast outlets. So they found different ways to get their message out. And they adopted everything from, you know, mimeograph machines, if you remember those, some of our viewers might, to, you know, the early online communities like CompuServe or Prodigy or America Online, to then they were very early adopters of social media. Again, they are innovators because they are seeing different, trying to work around, you know, societal barriers to their kind of slander and trying to find ways to get into the conversation. And we've certainly seen that much more extremist communication has moved online. And when I talk about their communication, I'm really talking about two things, both the recruitment, trying to, you know, bring in new members, but also the incitement, their sort of propaganda that spreads their hate. Now they sort of promote their ideologies in different forums. There's been some reasonable success in getting their poison off of big platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and ADL's really been at the forefront of that work. We opened our center in Silicon Valley way back in 2017, which in internet years is like a decade ago. And the team that we've recruited to staff our presence right in Palo Alto, they're not, you know, longtime nonprofit professionals. They're software engineers who are literally coming from startups and big companies, who speak the language, understand the culture, and are really equipped to deal with the threats. So what we've seen, I would say, is that the extremists who we're tracking, again, through our engineers are using AI and machine learning, and we have data scientists, a very interesting team. But we've watched them move, okay, again, not just no longer on Facebook and Twitter, but number one, they're moving to streaming services, places like Twitch or Caffeine, right, that are real time and so are harder to moderate. They've moved to new audio environments like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. Again, the audio space doesn't have the moderation tools that we now see on the older kind of social media services. And they've shifted to some of these short form video platforms. TikTok is a platform that's rampant with problems. Instagram Reels is also very troubling. And then there are the lesser known services like that are used for like person to person or multi-person communication. Gab, Discord, House Party, 8chan, and others. So we are watching them try to promote their ideas and gain adherence in all of these places. And that's the last thing that we want. I mean, we want to see these movements shrivel up and die, not cause harm to society. So we're working with these companies to help them understand what's happening, build the tools to tackle it. And when they aren't listening, you know, we try to call the companies in and work with them, but we'll call them out when they don't take action. I would also say, if I might, Lord Mann, that I think the incitement issue is a real problem as well, because we know that extremist propaganda can literally spark violence. And we've seen horrible examples. It's just over 2 years ago that Brenton Tarrant, you know, an Australian white supremacist, murdered over 50 Muslims in an attack on 2 New Zealand mosques. but he first posted a manifesto about the great replacement theory. This is this white supremacist idea that white people in Anglo-Saxon culture are being replaced by non-whites and multiculturalism, and that it's the Jews who are secretly behind this process. But I'm raising this issue because after the killings in New Zealand, you then had about a month later an attack here in the United States in Southern California, where another person, what we might call a lone wolf, was motivated by Tarrant and went and attacked a synagogue outside of San Diego. And he posted a manifesto and he cited the New Zealand shooter. And then a couple months after that, we had a shooting in El Paso, Texas, where a man tried to murder people he perceived to be Mexican. He ended up killing 22 people, almost all Latinos. And he also cited the New Zealand manifesto. So you see the propaganda that gets posted in New Zealand has reverberations around the world. We know that these extremists, you know, they are from Europe to the Middle East to Oceania. They are trading ideas. They are sort of building their movement. And it's really quite ugly, which is why we need, and it's so crucial to understand that tackling social media isn't some discretionary activity. It's an urgent imperative because these extremist movements are so globally linked. And the thing that links them together is social media. That's why we need to go in and stop it before the stuff spreads even more, more quickly.
No, thank you, Jonathan. Rola, let me come back to you. How deep is this partnership going to go at Chelsea? And are we talking you and Bruce and Roman, or will this go deeper into the club? You employ a lot of people at Chelsea Football Club. So how are you going to involve the whole of the club?
Well, I think all of this campaign, we have always tried to make sure that everyone are involved, from the players, staff, fans, and that's not going to be different with this specific campaign. So we've already started implementing, for example, No Place for Hate across UK schools, which has been a very successful pilot that we're now hoping to expand. And for that, we have the full educational team at the foundation involved, but we also have the players who participated in the launch. And we try to, from everything we do, always publish something online as well, to always ensure that our fans, as well as the various fan groups that we work with, are always can attend events and know what's going on. So it's really depending on what part of the program I think we'll definitely make sure that we have both player and general club involvement, as well as that there are a few events which will be made available for fans to attend.
Brilliant, brilliant. Sharon, one of the projects that Chelsea has helped fund is the Bina Europe project, a digital education project on Jewish identity and anti-Semitism for non-Jewish secondary school students. Can you just tell us a little bit more about Bina and its importance?
John, as you know better than anyone, part of the challenge that we see with anti-Semitism, rising anti-Semitism, really resides in ignorance, resides in not knowing what is Jewish identity, what is Jewish culture, what is Jewish history, and what are the religious connotations of being the Jew. And we know this from a lot of polling that we've done. And we know that a lot of the anti-Semitic views that are held come from people who have just never been exposed to Jewish people. So with this digital education product, which is new for us at ADL, and I have to tell you, we already knew that we needed more education products, but COVID definitely gave us the big push that we needed to understand that we need more online content. Bina, which means a knowledge in Hebrew, the word Bina, is a product that is actually exactly targeted what the demand from Jewish communities to us has been. What we've been asked for is content that is user-friendly, that is not too heavy and long and cumbersome. It is content that describes, again, the Jewish story, Jewish immigration story to Europe, for example, or to the UK, and also talks about manifestations of anti-Semitism today. How does it look in your communities? This product is modular, and therefore each module will tackle different issue areas as I just laid out. We've already rolled it out in the US. We've got a lot of positive responses. It is aimed for high school age group. We think that's the right age group because that's when they start getting exposed, both on the negative side and also are more ready and open to understand the story of a people, of the Jewish people. And so we think that a digital product that is straight to students with training for teachers who can use it, it's not very long, it's about 90 minutes, can both be really scalable, which is very important for us, but also really provides the exact needs that the communities have been bringing to us. We think the more citizens and students across the world know, understand, and know the story of the Jewish people, the more they will be resistant to some of the horrible stuff that they might even come across on TikTok, as we just mentioned. And we have to say also, you know, what just happened in the Middle East, for example, the conflict that happened, that those kind of issues get imported so quickly into all regions of the world, and it becomes part of the reality, not only of the day-to-day challenges that Jewish communities face, but specifically when Jewish communities are held responsible for conflict that goes on in the Middle East. So some of this education, some of this knowledge also helps prevent some of the misinformation that's on right now. And we're very concerned about that. There's been a huge surge again since this last conflict between Israel and Gaza, between Hamas, that students on campuses, young students in high schools, they are facing bullying, intimidation, threats. And the more knowledge there is, the more understanding there is about Jewish citizens of the UK, for example, that they are not to be held responsible for actions, policies going on in the Middle East, the more we can inoculate young people, especially to the pitfalls of anti-Semitism.
And Bruce, if I can come back to you. I mean,
Sure.
Jonathan referenced the growing internationalization of the white supremacist movement and the horrors that can flow from that. I mean, how do we stop this movement in its tracks? I mean, is it education we need, or do we need more cross-Atlantic partnerships like this partnership?
In terms of your question, John, I said both, but let me explain that. First of all, with respect to education, I guess in real estate, they say everything is about location, location, location. And I guess I would like to say that in terms of fighting discrimination, I think it's all about education, education, education. And that was not always the view of Chelsea Football Club until we really got into this 3 years ago. Over the history of the club, or the recent history of the club, we fought discrimination of all kinds through punishment. If a fan did something wrong, we punished them in one way or another. But all the work we've done over the last 3 years has taught us that doesn't work. That if you punish someone for saying something inappropriate and ban them from the stadium or whatever, you've got a bigot for life. And we've changed our entire approach to this and really focused a lot on education. And we have the support of the fans, and we really think it's working. So education is obviously very important. I think everyone, Rola, Jonathan, Sharon, have all pointed out that this is an international problem, and for sure it is. ADL operates pretty much around the world following extremist behavior. And one of the things a partnership will give us is the ability to compare experiences, compare best practices, and generally leverage off all their techniques and tools to hopefully improve what we're doing and make it even more of a success.
And I have a question that's come in from a member of the audience, which I think is probably one for you, Bruce, about how can you prevent or combat anti-Semitism within the fan base? You know, be it fans abusing Roman or obscenities against Tottenham or any other anti-Semitism amongst the fan base.
Well, I think we have to appreciate that our fan base is reflective of society. And that's just a fact of life. And there are hate crimes and there is anti-Semitism, et cetera, in society. But going back to the previous question, we're doing a lot with educating our fan base, and they're receptive to it. You know, as you know, we've taken a plane load to visit Auschwitz. We've had lots of seminars. We've brought Holocaust victims to meet with our fan base, to meet with our players. But to say we can wipe out these kinds of activities in our fan base overnight is, I mean, we'd like to, but we just have to realize that we are going to have some incidents. I do think there, except for social media, in terms of incidents in the stadium, around the stadium, I do think that that we've done a good job in fighting that. We do have a lot of work to do on social media.
And I've a question here about which I'm going to throw to Jonathan, about how do we best get reluctant stakeholders to get involved, be it supporters who are more reluctant, or entire football clubs or football federations who are reluctant. You know, you're working here, Jonathan, with the people with the best track record. That's sensible. And with Bruce crucially involved, we've got the whole of English football committed to taking action on anti-Semitism. Everyone's adopted the IRA definition across the entirety of English football, led by the Premier League and all of the Premier League. Bruce played a major role in that. We couldn't have done that without someone in the lead. But what about the reluctant clubs, the reluctant fans? How do you think we're going to try and reach them? What's your advice?
Sorry about that. It's a very good point, Lord Mann. And I think it's also correct to point out that with Rolla and Bruce's leadership, with Mr. Abramovich's, imprimatur, Chelsea has led in a way that few other clubs have, not just in the Premier League, in any league around the world. I think there are a few organizations in professional sports that have been as committed to the fight against hate as Chelsea Football Club. But I think there are two things to think about. So number one, I think we have to make the moral case in a clear and unambiguous way, right? And Lord Mann, you know this better than most. Extremism doesn't exist only on one end of the spectrum, right? It comes from the extreme right. It can come from a radical left, right? No side of the spectrum has a monopoly on morality. So what we've got to do is stand up and say anti-Semitism is a problem, anti-Asian hate, anti-Black racism, and use our moral voice to not just be for ourselves, but also to be for others. And when we do that, when we demonstrate the universality of these issues, how they are indeed interconnected, we can recruit allies in the fight. Rather than trying to go it alone, again, we demonstrate the interconnectedness, the intersectional nature of these different forms of prejudice. And we speak out against them in a clear way. So, Lord Mann, you can have very strong views about Beijing and their policies in China or in Asia, but that doesn't excuse attacking people of Asian descent, period. And you can have very strong views about Saudi Arabia and their policies toward their own citizens and their foreign policies, or Iran, who is the largest exporter of anti-Semitism in the world, right? And a brutal regime to its own people and terrible to its neighbors, but that doesn't excuse assaulting or attacking Muslim people just because you dislike the Republic of Iran. And by the same token, you can have strong feelings about the Middle East that doesn't excuse attacking Jewish people. When we stand for others, that's the best way of also standing for ourselves. That's number one. Number two, I think we have to create kind of like multilateral approaches, Lord Mann, that bring in others, that make it easy for them to participate. So one thing that we've done here in the United States is in 2017, the ADL launched an initiative we call the Sports Leadership Council, which is a partnership that convenes all of the major professional sports leagues in America football, American football, baseball, basketball, golf, tennis, racing cars, and others, along with the big amateur leagues, as well as with a number of the teams and some very prominent athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Venus Williams and a number of others. And the goal of this sports council is to promote positive social change and to combat hate and bullying, and using athletics, using sports as the lever to drive that change. And it's been very powerful. By the way, I should note that we were honored to have Eugene Tannenbaum and Rolla address the council recently about Chelsea's decision to adopt the IRA definition that you mentioned a few minutes ago, along with some of these other initiatives of the club, like the Say No to Anti-Semitism campaign. So again, I think a second way we can bring in even the reluctant is giving them the spaces where they can participate along with their peers, and they realize that there are broad-based movements that are demanding this kind of movement. That, Lord Mann, takes the onus off of them and makes it easier for them, I think, to step up.
Well, can I thank everyone for their contributions today? It's been fascinating. This is an important initiative. As the ADL knows, in private, I've been begging, pleading, shouting, saying we need more of an ADL presence in Europe. I even suggested, I recall at one time, how effective it would be if football was used as a vehicle. And I'm delighted that's been picked up. It was your wisdom. I didn't push Chelsea. I left you to think it through. Your wisdom to work with Chelsea. It's Chelsea's wisdom to work with you, and the huge expertise that you bring. I think this is a powerful partnership. And to those listening in, you know, in my walk of life, I see plenty of messaging, plenty of PR. This is for real. These people are for real. This is about doing real things, actual things. This is not some kind of fancy, well put together PR stunt. It will be well put together. The PR will be good, I'm certain. But that is not what this is about. That's why it's so important, and it's why it's been so powerful and effective. And it has the people at the top. When governments, the UK government, looks to see is something serious, do they mean it? Are the top people there? We have the leader of the ADL. We have the owner of Chelsea in the middle of this. We have the chairman here. This is big league. This is real. And so any of you listening in, if you have any suggestions, ideas, please do feed them through. They'll, I'm sure, be listened to. But the bottom line is this. Over the last couple of months, the teenagers, the Jewish teenagers at school, at work, at colleges in the UK and in other countries have been experiencing something that most of them have never experienced before. Something that their parents didn't experience at school. Vehement, direct anti-Semitism. The reach of football, the most successful football club at the current time anywhere on the planet, with the expertise and drive of ADL, those Jewish teenagers in our country and elsewhere in Europe should be more enthused and be more confident today. That's the prize that's at stake. Thank you, Chelsea Football Club. Thank you, Roman. Thank you, the Chelsea FC Foundation. Thank you, Jonathan, Sharon, and the ADL. And you know, Rollo and I are meeting together tomorrow. So some of the nitty gritty, I'll throw a few more little bits in trying to make sure that you're all delivering even more than you've promised. Thank you. This is Big League. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.